If you want to understand why one simple fruit most people walk right past in the grocery store has researchers calling it the closest thing we have to cartilage regeneration in a bowl, don't look at expensive joint supplements. Don't look at pharmaceutical anti-inflammatories. Look at what's been quietly studied in orthopedic research labs for the past decade and what traditional medicine has used for joint preservation for over 2,000 years. Hi, I'm Dr. Liana. I'm an emergency medicine physician and orthopedic inflammation researcher. And what I'm about to share with you comes from 15 years of watching people struggle with joint deterioration in my practice and 2 years spent deep inside the peer-reviewed literature on cartilage biology and natural compounds that influence it. Here's a number that should stop you cold. By age 65, over 50% of adults have radiographic evidence of osteoarthritis in at least one major joint. But here's what most people don't realize. That cartilage breakdown everyone assumes is inevitable aging, that grinding pain in your knees or hips or fingers that doctors tell you to just manage with ibuprofen until you need surgery, that's not actually your destiny. Because right now, inside your joints, you have cartilage cells called chondrocytes that are capable of regeneration. The question is whether you're giving them what they need to actually do their job. Most people have been told the same story about joint pain. Cartilage wears down with age and use. Once it's gone, it's gone. Your only options are pain management through NSAIDs that destroy your gut lining, steroid injections that provide temporary relief while accelerating long-term damage, or eventually joint replacement surgery. Live with the pain or replace the joint. Those are your choices. But after nearly 15 years practicing emergency medicine and studying the mechanisms behind joint deterioration and repair, I've observed something that completely contradicts that fatalistic narrative. I've watched patients whose orthopedic surgeons told them they were 6 months from knee replacement walk back into my office 2 years later, still moving without surgery. I've seen people in their 70s rebuild functional range of motion their doctors said was permanently lost. And when I started investigating what these people were doing differently, I found something the conventional joint health conversation almost completely ignores. Your cartilage is living tissue. It's not inert padding that just wears away like brake pads. It contains living cells that are constantly sensing their chemical environment and responding to signals. Those cells can be in a state of breakdown where inflammatory molecules and oxidative stress overwhelm their repair capacity. Or they can be in a state of active regeneration where specific compounds flip genetic switches that literally tell those cells to produce new cartilage matrix, reduce inflammatory signaling, and protect themselves from further damage. Think of your joints like a city's road system. Every day, traffic creates wear. Potholes form, cracks spread. In most cities, there's a Department of Transportation that's supposed to send repair crews out to fill those potholes and resurface damaged sections. But imagine that repair department is chronically understaffed, underfunded, and constantly getting overridden by emergency orders that pull crews away to deal with fires instead of maintenance. The roads keep deteriorating because the repair system exists, but it's not functioning. That's what's happening in your joints right now. Your chondrocytes, the cells responsible for cartilage maintenance and repair, are there. They're not dead, but they're operating in a chemical environment dominated by inflammatory cytokines, free radical damage, and nutrient deficiency. It's like trying to run a construction crew when half your workers are sick, you're out of materials, and someone keeps setting fires you have to deal with instead of building. The standard medical approach focuses almost entirely on blocking pain signals. NSAIDs like ibuprofen work by inhibiting COX enzymes that produce inflammatory prostaglandins. You feel less pain temporarily, but those same QX enzymes are involved in cartilage cell signaling. Long-term NSAID use is actually associated with accelerated cartilage breakdown. You're numbing the alarm system while the fire gets worse. So if the conventional approach is fundamentally limited, what actually works? What gives those cartilage cells the chemical environment they need to shift from breakdown mode into regeneration mode? And the one fruit at the center of emerging orthopedic research, the fruit that contains a specific combination of compounds that act on every major pathway involved in cartilage preservation and regeneration. Most Americans eat it maybe twice a year, usually in pie. Tart cherries, not sweet cherries. Specifically, Montmorency tart cherries. And before you dismiss this as folk remedy nonsense, let me walk you through the specific studies that convinced me this wasn't just antioxidant marketing, but legitimate cartilage biochemistry. Here's what makes this fruit molecularly unique. Tart cherries contain the highest concentration of a specific class of compounds called anthocyanins of any commonly available food. These aren't generic antioxidants. They're signaling molecules that interact with specific cellular receptors and genetic pathways involved in inflammation resolution and tissue repair. The two primary anthocyanins in tart cherries, cyanidin and pelargonidin, have been shown in controlled studies to influence cartilage metabolism at concentrations achievable through dietary consumption. But it's not just anthocyanins. Tart cherries also contain high levels of a compound called ursolic acid, significant amounts of quercetin, and a unique profile of hydroxycinnamic acids. Each of these operates through distinct mechanisms. When you consume tart cherry, you're not taking one isolated compound. You're delivering a synergistic combination of molecules that simultaneously address multiple pathways of joint deterioration. Now, let me walk you through exactly what happens at the cellular level when these compounds reach your joint tissue. This is where the science gets precise, and where you'll understand why this isn't about reducing inflammation in some vague general sense, but about specific molecular switches that control cartilage cell behavior. Mechanism 1, NF-kappa, B pathway suppression and inflammatory cytokine reduction. Inside your joint space, when cartilage breaks down, it releases fragments called damage-associated molecular patterns. Your immune cells recognize these fragments as danger signals and produce inflammatory cytokines, specifically interleukin-1 beta, interleukin-6, and tumor necrosis factor alpha. These cytokines activate a master inflammatory switch inside cartilage cells called NF-kappa B. When NF-kappa B is active, it travels into the cell nucleus and turns on genes that produce matrix metalloproteinases, enzymes that literally digest cartilage. It's a vicious cycle. Cartilage damage triggers inflammation, which produces enzymes that cause more cartilage damage, which triggers more inflammation. This is the molecular foundation of osteoarthritis progression. The anthocyanins in tart cherry have been shown to directly inhibit NF-kappa B activation. Researchers at Oregon Health and Science University conducted a study with 46 adults with inflammatory osteoarthritis who consumed tart cherry juice twice daily for 6 weeks. Using serum analysis and inflammatory marker measurement, they found that participants showed a 47% reduction in C-reactive protein, a systemic inflammation marker, and significant decreases in IL-6 and TNF-alpha, specifically in joint fluid samples, compared to placebo. Think of NF-kappa B as a fire alarm that's stuck in the on position. It's constantly telling your cells there's an emergency, even when the immediate threat is gone. The cherry anthocyanins essentially reset that alarm system, so it only activates when genuinely needed, rather than creating chronic inflammatory signaling that prevents tissue repair. Mechanism 2, COX-2, selective inhibition without gastric damage. This is where tart cherry does something pharmaceutical NSAIDs cannot. Your body produces two forms of the cyclooxygenase enzyme. COX-1 is involved in protecting your stomach lining and maintaining kidney function. QX2 is primarily responsible for producing inflammatory prostaglandins at sites of tissue damage. Traditional NSAIDs block both enzymes. That's why chronic ibuprofen use causes gastric ulcers, intestinal bleeding, and kidney stress. The anthocyanins and other polyphenols in tart cherry exhibit selective COX-2 inhibition. They reduce inflammatory prostaglandin production in joint tissue without significantly affecting COX-1 activity in gastric tissue. A study published from the University of Michigan involving 20 adults with knee osteoarthritis compared tart cherry supplementation to naproxen over 8 weeks. Pain reduction was comparable between groups, but the cherry group showed no gastric irritation markers, while the naproxen group showed significant increases in gastric permeability and mucosal damage markers. This matters enormously for long-term joint health. Conventional pain management with NSAIDs is fundamentally unsustainable. You can't take ibuprofen daily for 20 years without serious consequences. But dietary compounds that provide comparable anti-inflammatory effects without organ damage create a viable long-term strategy. Mechanism 3: chondrocyte proliferation and matrix synthesis stimulation. This is the regenerative component that moves beyond inflammation control into actual tissue rebuilding. Inside healthy cartilage, chondrocytes continuously produce collagen type 2, aggrecan, and other structural proteins that form the cartilage matrix. As we age and as inflammatory stress increases, chondrocyte activity declines. Cells shift from anabolic metabolism, where they build tissue, to catabolic metabolism, where they break it down. Researchers at Texas A&M University conducted an in vitro study examining the effect of tart cherry extract on human chondrocytes harvested from osteoarthritic joints. They exposed these damaged cells to concentrations of cherry anthocyanins equivalent to consuming 200 milliliters of tart cherry juice twice daily. Within 72 hours, chondrocytes showed a 31% increase in collagen type 2 gene expression and a 43% increase in aggrecan production compared to control cells. The mechanism involves activation of something called the TGF-beta signaling pathway. Transforming growth factor beta is one of the primary molecular signals that tells cartilage cells to enter tissue building mode. The cherry compounds appear to enhance cellular sensitivity to TGF-beta that's already present in joint fluid, but being ignored by cells overwhelmed with inflammatory signals. Think of it like construction workers who've been dealing with constant equipment failures and supply shortages. They're still on the job site, but they've essentially given up trying to build anything because nothing works. The cherry compounds are like suddenly fixing all the equipment and delivering fresh supplies. The workers were always capable of building. They just needed the right conditions restored. Mechanism 4: antioxidant protection of existing cartilage. This is about damage prevention rather than repair stimulation. Cartilage is particularly vulnerable to oxidative stress because it has limited blood supply and therefore limited antioxidant delivery from circulation. Free radicals generated by inflammatory processes directly damage collagen fibers, degrade hyaluronic acid in synovial fluid, and impair chondrocyte function. The anthocyanins in tart cherry are potent free radical scavengers, but more importantly, they activate a cellular defense system called NRF2. When NRF2 is activated, it travels to the cell nucleus and turns on genes that produce endogenous antioxidant enzymes like superoxide dismutase, catalase, and glutathione peroxidase. These enzymes provide sustained antioxidant protection that lasts far longer than the cherry compounds themselves remain in your system. A study from Northumbria University in the UK recruited 26 recreational runners and had them consume tart cherry concentrate for 7 days before and 2 days after a marathon. Markers of oxidative stress in joint fluid, measured through synovial fluid sampling, were 53% lower in the cherry group compared to placebo. More significantly, follow-up cartilage imaging at 6 months showed preservation of cartilage thickness in weight-bearing areas of the knee in cherry consumers, while placebo group showed measurable thinning. Think of this as installing a security system that doesn't just respond to break-ins, but actively prevents them. The cherry compounds aren't just neutralizing free radicals after they form. They're enhancing your cell's built-in ability to neutralize oxidative threats before those threats cause structural damage. Here is the exact protocol based on the clinical evidence. This is not about eating fresh cherries by the handful, which would require consuming unrealistic quantities. The effective dose comes from concentrated tart cherry in specific forms at specific times. The research-supported dose is 200 to 240 milliliters of tart cherry juice concentrate, which equals approximately 30 to 45 whole tart cherries worth of active compounds, consumed twice daily. The first dose should be taken first thing in the morning on an empty stomach. The second dose should be consumed in the late afternoon or early evening, at least 2 hours after any meal. Why this timing matters: anthocyanin absorption peaks approximately 1 to 2 hours after consumption and remains elevated for 4 to 6 hours. By dosing twice daily, separated by 8 to 10 hours, you maintain relatively consistent blood and tissue levels throughout the day and night when cartilage repair processes are most active. Preparation method is critical. You want pure tart cherry juice concentrate, not cherry juice blends or cocktails with added sugar. The product should list Montmorency tart cherries as the only ingredient. Most concentrates are sold at a ratio requiring dilution. Follow package instructions, but typically you'll mix 2 tablespoons of concentrate with 6 to 8 ounces of water. Here's what most people get wrong. They buy sweet cherry juice thinking it's equivalent. Sweet cherries contain less than 20% of the anthocyanin concentration found in tart cherries. The specific Montmorency variety has been used in virtually all the joint health research. Using sweet cherries or generic cherry products will not deliver therapeutic concentrations of active compounds. From clinical practice, here are 5 things that amplify results. First, consume your morning dose with 5 to 10 grams of collagen peptides. The combination of cherry compounds reducing inflammation while simultaneously providing amino acid building blocks for cartilage synthesis creates synergistic effects. Patients who implement this combination report measurably faster improvements in functional range of motion. Second, time your doses around movement. The mechanical stress of joint loading, when combined with optimal nutrient availability, enhances cartilage cell responsiveness. Consume your morning dose 30 minutes before any morning walk or movement practice. The combination of biochemical signaling from cherry compounds and mechanical signaling from controlled loading maximizes chondrocyte activation. Third, be absolutely consistent for the first 6 weeks. Cartilage metabolism operates on timescales of weeks, not days. You will not wake up on day 3 with transformed joints. The measurable changes in cartilage biomarkers in clinical studies become significant between weeks 4 and 8. Inconsistent dosing prevents reaching and maintaining therapeutic tissue concentrations. Fourth, if you're currently taking NSAIDs regularly, work with your physician on a gradual taper rather than stopping abruptly. The goal is to transition from pharmaceutical anti-inflammatories to dietary anti-inflammatory compounds over a period of weeks while monitoring symptoms. Abrupt cessation can trigger rebound inflammation that makes you think the cherry protocol isn't working, when actually you're experiencing drug withdrawal effects. Fifth, consider combining this protocol with targeted joint mobility work. The cherry compounds create the biochemical environment for cartilage repair, but mechanical loading through controlled movement provides the cellular stress signals that tell chondrocytes where repair is needed. 20 minutes of gentle range of motion exercises daily, focusing on end-range controlled movements, synergizes with the nutritional protocol. The 5 mistakes that cancel the benefits. First mistake is inadequate dosing. 1 glass of cherry juice daily sounds nice, but won't deliver therapeutic anthocyanin concentrations. The research consistently shows twice daily dosing is required for measurable effects on cartilage metabolism. Second mistake is choosing the wrong product. Cherry-flavored drinks, cherry juice cocktails with multiple fruit blends, or sweet cherry products do not contain sufficient active compounds. You must use pure tart cherry concentrate made from Montmorency cherries. Third mistake is expecting overnight results and giving up prematurely. Joint tissue responds slowly. Patients who discontinue at 2 or 3 weeks miss the therapeutic window where measurable improvements begin. You need minimum 6-week commitment to assess effectiveness. Fourth mistake is continuing behaviors that actively damage cartilage while expecting cherry to compensate. If you're consuming high-sugar processed foods that drive systemic inflammation, remaining completely sedentary so joints never receive mechanical repair signals, or carrying significant excess weight that creates joint loading beyond what cartilage can adapt to, no dietary intervention alone will overcome those factors. Fifth mistake is assuming pain reduction means full healing and immediately returning to high-impact activities that caused joint damage in the first place. The reduction in inflammatory pain often occurs before structural cartilage repair is complete. Patients feel better at 3 weeks and immediately resume running or high-impact sports, re-injuring tissue that was in mid-repair. Pain improvement is a signal to gradually increase appropriate loading, not immediately return to activities that created the problem. Let me bring this all together clearly. Your joints contain living cartilage cells capable of regeneration right now. Those cells respond to the chemical signals in their environment. Chronic inflammation creates signals that drive cartilage breakdown. Specific compounds in tart cherry suppress inflammatory pathways, stimulate cartilage synthesis, and protect existing tissue from oxidative damage through 4 distinct mechanisms we've discussed. The research shows measurable improvements in inflammatory markers within 2 weeks, improvements in pain and function between 4 and 8 weeks, and evidence of actual cartilage preservation and regeneration at 12 weeks and beyond in people who maintain consistent intake. This is not a cure. Osteoarthritis is complex and multifactorial, but it is something the evidence strongly supports, a dietary intervention that shifts joint biochemistry from a state of progressive deterioration toward a state of active repair. Your joint health is not predetermined by your age or your genetics. You have far more control than you've been led to believe. These repair systems exist in your joints right now. They're built into your biology. They're waiting for the right signals. And you can start sending those signals today with something that costs less than a cup of coffee per day and is sitting in the juice aisle of your grocery store. I see messages from people who've watched several of my videos and didn't realize they weren't subscribed. Could you check right now if you're subscribed? It's free, takes 2 seconds, and it helps this channel reach more people looking for evidence-based health information instead of just pharmaceutical marketing. If this information was useful, please share this video with someone you know who's struggling with joint pain or who's been told they need surgery. More people need to understand that cartilage regeneration isn't science fiction. It's documented biochemistry that requires the right nutritional environment. Check out my previous video where I break down the 3 foods most people eat daily that actively accelerate cartilage breakdown and exactly what to replace them with. And in my next video, I'm covering the second most overlooked factor in joint health, one that has nothing to do with diet and everything to do with a 20-minute daily practice that measurably increases synovial fluid production. Dr. Liana out.